On screen, two dates, 1975 and 1976. One deployment, 2 years, and they refuse to agree. The documentary on screen is called The Operations the SAS Still Won't Discuss, Northern Ireland, 1976 to 1997. Its timeline begins in 1976. Beneath it, in the comments section, a viewer who claims to have served in the regiment wrote a single sentence. As ex-SAS, it was 1975 that we got sent to NI. That sentence drew 84 engagements and 27 replies. It's the most visible challenge to the film's chronology, and it comes from someone claiming to have been there. That sentence is a first-person claim, offered without corroborating evidence. It isn't treated as a lie, and it isn't treated as proof. It gets the label first person but unverified, and the label is doing real work. A claim about the past made by a named, checkable participant in a documented setting can move a historical argument. An anonymous comment beneath a YouTube video from a user whose identity and service history can't be checked can't move one on its own. Withholding authentication is methodological, not personal. The numbers attached to the comment deserve the same caution. 84 engagements and 27 replies are reported figures from an internal dataset. They can't be independently confirmed. And even if they were exact, engagement measures activity, not accuracy. YouTube's own analytics documentation defines engagement metrics as measurements of user interaction, comments, likes, shares. A striking claim draws reactions, whether it's true or false. A true claim can sit ignored. The wider dataset shows the same point from another angle. Across 16 of the 50 displayed comments, the audit's category Law Addition Correction produced 353 engagements. 3 accuracy-focused criticisms generated 108 between them. That distribution tells its own story. The viewers who bothered to argue were split between people adding law and people checking it. The comment section is doing genuine argumentative work. What it isn't doing is minting evidence. And the dataset itself has a fault line. The audit counted 277 comments on the video. The preview displayed 361. Those numbers don't agree, and the discrepancy is unresolved. YouTube's own help documentation acknowledges that the comment count shown above a thread can differ from the number actually loaded or counted in analytics, a known platform issue. The consequence for this investigation is simple. The 50 displayed comments available for review are only part of the reported dataset, and the size of the dataset is itself in dispute. Before the history, a brief note on method. 4 labels will appear throughout this script, and each has a precise meaning. Supported by supplied transcript means the claim appears in the anchor documentary, which itself cites primary records, documented secondary evidence, not the archive in person. First person but unverified means a participant claim with no independent corroboration and no checkable identity. Disputed means the sources genuinely conflict. Unresolved means the question stands open, pending evidence that does not currently exist in the public record. The dispute itself collapses into 3 words that are constantly used as if they were interchangeable: present, operational, and formally deployed. A soldier can be present in a place without being operationally tasked. He can be operationally tasked inside a covert structure without his regiment being formally deployed. And a regiment can be formally deployed long after years of individual presence and covert operations. Hold those three categories apart, and the 1975 claim stops being a contradiction of the 1976 record. It becomes a question of which category the man is remembering. The supplied record anchors the formal deployment to January 1976. Its framing is specific. It describes Harold Wilson, the Labour Prime Minister, quietly authorising the redeployment of a regiment that had, in the film's words, been formally banned from operating in the United Kingdom for 7 years, the Special Air Service. The transcript says the announcement followed 2 days later, and it cites the parliamentary record, Hansard, 12th of January 1976, volume 903. That citation is real. Hansard records Wilson telling the House of Commons that troops of the Special Air Service Regiment are joining the security forces in South Armagh, and that they would be used for patrolling and surveillance. The phrase to hold on to is the full name, the Special Air Service Regiment. This wasn't a reference to individuals seconded into another unit. The regiment itself, named on the floor of the Commons, was committed to a defined role in a defined place. This claim carries the label "supported by supplied transcript." That label is chosen deliberately. The transcript is a secondary account, not the archive. Its citations point to real records, Hansard, state papers, but its own summaries carry compression. The 2 days later sequence is the clearest example. The massacre, usually cited as the trigger, happened on 5th of January. The government's decision came on 7th of January. Wilson spoke on the 12th. 5 days, not 2. The shape is right, the arithmetic is loose. The same caution applies to the "formally banned for 7 years" line. The historical record supports a political stance against acknowledged SAS operations in the United Kingdom. It does not support a codified legal prohibition in the strong sense. Covert units with SAS links were active years before 1976, under other names and other covers. The ban was real as official policy. It wasn't absolute as operational fact. Why January 1976, then? The immediate context answers that question in a few sentences. On 4th of January 1976, Loyalist gunmen killed 6 Catholics in 2 coordinated attacks, 3 members of the Reevy family at Whitecross, 3 of the O'Dowd family near Ballydugan. On the evening of 5th of January, around 5:30, a red Ford Transit minibus carrying textile workers home from Glenann Mill was stopped on the Kingsmill Road near Whitecross. A man in combat clothing signalled with a torch, so the workers believed they had reached an army checkpoint. 11 gunmen with blackened faces emerged from the hedges. They ordered the men out, lined them up against the bus, and asked which of them was Catholic. The sole Catholic was allowed to leave. The others were shot at close range. 10 men died. Alan Black survived, hit 18 times. He later said of the gunfire, "I didn't even flinch because I knew if I moved there would be another one." Roughly 136 rounds were fired in under a minute. A caller claimed responsibility the next day for the South Armagh Republican Action Force. The Historical Inquiries team concluded in 2011 that the Provisional IRA had carried out the attack using that name as a cover while on an official ceasefire. A police ombudsman report in 2025 and a coroner's inquest in 2024 reached the same conclusion. The inquest called Kingsmill an overtly sectarian attack by the IRA, mounted because the deceased men were Protestants and for no other reason. Now the precision point. The Kingsmill-focused official sources don't record a formal decision explicitly linking the SAS deployment to the massacre. The connection is contextual inference drawn from timing. Massacre on the 5th, decision on the 7th, announcement on the 12th. A week that opens with 10 factory workers shot dead at a fake checkpoint and closes with the SAS publicly committed to South Armagh does not need a written causal link to explain itself. But a script committed to precision says the link is inferred, not documented. What is documented is the sequence. The National Archives hold a file recording that on the 7th of January 1976, the British government decided to send SAS units into South Armagh. The Cain conflict chronology, maintained at the University of Ulster, records a unit of the SAS moving into the area that day and calls it the first occasion when the deployment of SAS troops was officially acknowledged. That sentence is the clearest available statement of what changed in January 1976. Not first arrival, first official acknowledgement. The Canova primer on Operation Banner, written by the Centre for Defence Studies at King's College London, describes the acknowledged deployment as a political act driven by the Prime Minister. The organisation Action on Armed Violence, collating the official statements, records that Wilson, the Defence Secretary, and the Northern Ireland Secretary agreed on 3 points. The SAS would be deployed, the deployment would be announced publicly, and there would be no covert operations by the SAS. That last point is quietly revealing. The policy decision that the deployment wouldn't be covert implies, in its own terms, that covert operations were the status quo it was replacing. The size of the initial commitment is genuinely disputed. One operational history records a 12-man troop deployed to Bessbrook, recently the scene of an attack on a bus, soon reinforced by all of D Squadron. The Canova primer refers to a small troop of around 11 men. A third account refers to 150 SAS soldiers sent to Armagh in early January. Sources agree on the character of the commitment. Elements of the regiment, not the whole of 22 SAS, as a single formation. They don't agree on the count, and this script won't invent one. Label: disputed. The formal deployment brought with it a paper trail. Wilson resigned on the 16th of March 1976, 10 weeks after the announcement. The policy outlasted the Prime Minister. By the night of the 5th of May 1976, 8 plainclothes SAS soldiers had crossed into County Louth in the Republic of Ireland and were arrested by the Irish Army and the Garda Síochána. The government confirmed that 8 men of the SAS regiment had entered Irish territory. The official explanation was a map-reading error. Formed SAS teams were operating on the border under the new acknowledged deployment, and the consequences were already national incidents. So much for what January 1976 was. The harder question is what came before it, because both the documentary's argument and the commenter's memory depend on the answer. The transcript states that January 1976 formalised what was already happening, attaching parliamentary acknowledgement to an existing covert presence and, in its own words, bringing with it the chain of legal accountability that acknowledgement required. The word the film chose is formalised, not begun, not arrived, formalised. That reading is supported by the supplied transcript, and it matters because it tells viewers what the film itself claims. The 1976 date is about status and acknowledgement, not about first contact. The independent record backs that framing. D Squadron of 22 SAS deployed to Northern Ireland in 1969 for just over a month, conducting covert surveillance on suspected gun running and thefts of explosives from quarries. Canova records a second covert deployment in 1970. Small numbers of SAS personnel returned in 1972 for intelligence gathering. None of it was announced. None of it was a formal regimental deployment. All of it was presence. A caution attaches to that list. These deployments are known because they have been documented by investigators and historians. The absence of a documented deployment in any given year does not prove that none occurred. Secrecy is the default mode of Special Forces record-keeping. The catalogue of known pre-1976 activity is almost certainly incomplete. That is precisely why the historical record leans on the categories this script is using, and why it refuses to treat an unverified 1975 claim as proof of a formal deployment. The institutional machinery that matters most to the 1975 question took shape in the early 1970s. The Military Reaction Force ran covert operations in Belfast from the summer of 1971. Plainclothes soldiers, unmarked cars, surveillance and direct action, under no acknowledged banner, disbanded by early 1973. Then came the Special Reconnaissance Unit, also known as 14 Field Security and Intelligence Company, or 14 Intelligence Company, established in 1972 as a clandestine intelligence unit under Headquarters Northern Ireland. Around 120 personnel deployed in November 1972. In January 1974 came the mechanism that directly bridges toward the commenter's memory. According to the account assembled in the Canova Primer and the Pat Finucane Centre's study of countergangs, 1 SAS officer and 30 NCOs were permitted to recap badge under their parent regiments and serve as individual reinforcements to the Special Reconnaissance Unit. A briefing from the period notes that these men had been serving with the SRU since early January and were due to resume service with 22 SAS by 7th April. Soldiers direct from SAS service went to Northern Ireland in January 1974, served a defined tour inside a covert unit, and returned to the regiment. No SAS unit deployed. The government's own formula for the arrangement survives in that same briefing. Men who have served with the SAS are serving in the SRU Special Reconnaissance Unit, but no SAS units are operating in Northern Ireland. The briefing insists, in case the distinction is missed, that no SAS unit has been or is stationed in Northern Ireland. Both statements were true at the same time. Men with SAS service present and operating. No SAS unit stationed or deployed. The distinction between individual soldiers and formed units isn't a contrivance of modern analysis. It's the period's own official language. Merlin Rees, the Home Secretary, carried the same formula to the House of Commons, assuring Parliament that no units of the SAS are operating in Northern Ireland. The construction did real institutional work. It allowed the government to deny unit deployment while SAS-trained soldiers worked undercover inside the SRU. The record contains a concrete example of what that looked like. On 26th of January 1974, SAS personnel intercepted loyalist paramilitaries returning weapons to a derelict farmhouse outside Saintfield, County Down. An SAS operation on the ground in Northern Ireland in January 1974, exactly 2 years before the formal deployment. The cover structures even had cover names of their own. The SRU and its sub-elements operated under labels that disguised covert operations as routine training activity, including Northern Ireland Training and Advisory Teams, Northern Ireland, a name that made surveillance operators sound like classroom instructors. The capacity for SAS-linked personnel to be present and operational without the regiment being formally deployed wasn't an accident. It was engineered. There is a recorded trace of the specific bridge into 1975. The transcript claims that administrative records listed some individuals as belonging to 22 SAS from mid-1975, while those individuals functioned inside intelligence-gathering frameworks in Northern Ireland. This claim carries the label supported by supplied transcript. It's exactly the kind of detail that could reconcile the commenter's memory with the official timeline. A soldier placed on 22 SAS strength in mid-1975 and then serving in Northern Ireland under a cover structure could genuinely remember 1975 as the year he was sent. That memory could be entirely true and still not document a regimental deployment. Individuals on the strength of a regiment seconded elsewhere aren't the same thing as the regiment deployed. One operational history of British Special Forces puts the SAS over the water in small numbers since 1973, mostly in advisory roles, before 1976 changed the scale and the status. Britannica's entry on the regiment is plainer. Although small teams had been working undercover since soon after the start of the Troubles, it wasn't until 1976 that the regiment's formal deployment was announced. Some events sit directly on the disputed line between the 2 years, and they model the problem neatly. The history of the Special Air Service attributes the first operation credited to the SAS in this period to the arrest of Sean McKenna on 12th of March 1975. McKenna alleged he had been abducted from just south of the border. The SAS claimed he was found wandering drunk. At least 2 detailed histories of Northern Ireland date the same abduction to March 1976, after the public deployment. Label disputed. A documented high-profile SAS action carrying a contested year in the sources is a warning about the whole conversation. The period record isn't clean, and confident assertions about exact dates in it deserve suspicion in both directions. Another 1975 event points the same way. On 22nd of November 1975, 3 soldiers of the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers were killed at an observation post at Drummocaval on the border. One history describes the ambush as prompting the deployment of the SAS in the area, with the government announcing that deployment the next year, despite unofficial deployments for a number of years. Operational pressure in 1975. Public announcement in 1976. The pattern repeats. Even the regimental record carries a soft trace for this period. One specialist history notes that B Squadron was tentatively introduced into the province in 1974, ahead of the public commitment in January 1976. It's a single source, and it should be read as one. But it joins the other markers. Formed elements edging toward the province, individuals on regimental strength, operations conducted under other covers, and an official vocabulary carefully restricted to the word units. Now the 3 categories do their work. Apply them in order. Present. SAS personnel were physically in Northern Ireland from 1969 onward. D Squadron in 1969 for just over a month. Small numbers in 1972. The re-cap-badged officer and 30 NCOs with the SRU from January 1974. Individuals listed as 22 SAS from mid-1975 on the transcript's account. Presence is documented across the entire period before 1976. Operational. Those personnel conducted operations. The Saintfield interception in January 1974. The SRU's surveillance and intelligence work across 1974 and 1975. Whatever occurred with Sean McKenna in 1975 or 1976. The response to the Drummocaval ambush. Operations under other covers are documented before the formal deployment. Formally deployed. The regiment, under its own name, committed as a formed force with official acknowledgement. Decided on 7th of January 1976. Announced to Parliament on 12th of January 1976. recorded in Hansard, volume 903. Described by Kane as the first occasion when the deployment of SAS troops was officially acknowledged. This three-part structure isn't a modern framework imposed on old records. The distinction between individuals and units appears in the documents of the time. The "No SAS Unit" briefing, the "Men who have served with the SAS" formula, Rees's parliamentary answer. Official practice today preserves the same shape. UK defence statistics define deployment as military personnel deployed on operations for a period of 24 hours or more, and separately track military presence by stationed location. Military doctrine makes the same cut. Deployment is the movement of forces into and out of an operational area. Employment is what forces do once they are there. Being somewhere and being deployed as a unit are different categories in the professional vocabulary. One qualification is owed here. The modern definitions are a framework for reading the 1970s, not a claim that the period used these exact words. But the underlying distinction, individuals versus units, presence versus deployment, is in the 1970s record itself, in the government's own sentence about men who had served with the SAS and units that weren't operating there. Now apply the framework to the commenter. As ex-SAS, it was 1975 that we got sent to NI. The sentence is ambiguous in exactly the way the three categories predict. Sent could describe an individual posting in 1975. A soldier on 22 SAS strength, recap badged, serving with the SRU or a similar structure. That version is fully compatible with the documented record, and it may be precisely what the man remembers. Sent could also describe a formed regimental deployment in 1975, which the record does not support. The claim, as stated, can't be assigned to either category. Label: unresolved. Neither should the absence of a 1975 deployment record be treated as proof that nothing happened. Secrecy cuts both ways. A missing operation order does not prove the absence of 1975 SAS activity, any more than the commenter's sentence proves that a regimental deployment occurred. Special Forces records are restricted by design. The 1975 question is unresolved, not disproven. Both corrections must be held together. January 1976 shouldn't be narrated as the first time the SAS set foot in Northern Ireland. It wasn't, and the official sources never claimed it was. But the claimed veteran identity shouldn't be treated as authentication. The comment is a first-person claim, a man remembering his own service, and quite possibly remembering it accurately. It isn't a primary record. The history is served by neither erasing the earlier presence nor accepting an unverified comment as proof of a formal deployment. The verdict is bounded on all sides. First, January 1976 is supported as the formal deployment date. The supplied transcript says so, and independent sources corroborate it. The National Archives record of the 7th January decision, the Kane chronology's first occasion officially acknowledged, and Hansard's record of Wilson's 12th January statement. Label: supported by supplied transcript. Second, earlier activity under other covers is supported by the supplied account and independently documented. The 1969 D Squadron deployment, the 1971 MRF and the 1972 SRU structures, the January 1974 recap badging of 1 officer and 30 NCOs, the government's own No SAS Unit formula. The category present and operational but not formally deployed is real, documented and deliberately engineered. Label: supported by supplied transcript, independently corroborated. Third, the precise status of any 1975 regimental deployment remains unresolved. An individual 1975 posting is plausible and would reconcile the commenter's memory with the record. A formal 1975 regimental deployment is unproven, and the commenter's sentence, standing alone, can't carry that weight. Label: unresolved. The question then passes to the archive. What specific primary record could distinguish operational presence in 1975 from formal deployment in January 1976? The candidates are concrete. A unit war diary for 22 SAS covering 1975 and 1976 would show whether the regiment, or elements of it, deployed as a formed unit and under what orders. Though Special Forces diaries are guarded, and a missing diary proves nothing either way. An operation order or ministerial authorization would be the strongest possible record of formal deployment. The January 1976 decision already exists in a National Archives file. An after-action report from any 1975 operation could reveal whether it was conducted under 22 SAS identity or under another cover. An individual service record could show a soldier on 22 SAS strength while seconded to the SRU, presence and posting, without showing regimental deployment. The Irish Department of Foreign Affairs file on the period already distinguishes no SAS unit from individual SAS personnel in the SRU. Proof that the distinction was bureaucratically real on both sides of the border. Each record answers a different question. A war diary could record presence without using the words formal deployment. A service record could prove a man was in Northern Ireland in 1975 without proving his regiment was deployed. Only a document of authorization, an order, a ministerial minute, a cabinet decision, settles the difference between operational presence and formal deployment. That is the record to look for. The commenter's memory deserves respect as a human recollection. It does not deserve the status of a historical fact. And the January 1976 record deserves its precision. Formal, acknowledged, parliamentary. The first time the regiment was named in that role. Arriving after years of presence, the official record couldn't yet name. If you have a war diary, an operation order, an after-action report, or a service record that bears on this, the comment section is the place for it. Whatever the true count of comments, 277 or 361, the people there want this answered properly. The record is the only way to answer it.